Everyone, my name is Jayden Garner from the Exertion Games Lab at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia, and I welcome you all to my talk today on identity. Innominate movement representation as engaging game element. My talk is broken up into three main parts. First, demonstrating a game called identity as an example of using innominate movement representation. Second, running through the process and methods used to evaluate the design of identity. Third, presenting design considerations and corresponding strategies to guide designers on how innominate movement representation can be used as a game element in order to facilitate engaging play experiences. I now introduce my co-authors Gavin Wood, who presented a talk yesterday on designing playful interactive apps for children in public libraries. Sebastian Penapel, who has been working on designing interactive technology for skateboarders. Martin Muir, who is currently exploring the design of playful user interfaces. And last but not least, Floyd Mueller, who directs the Exertion Games Lab. Together we designed identity. And I'm going to get some people now to demonstrate the game. So Identity is a 4-player role-playing game that involves a group of 3 spies and an interrogator. The 3 spies each hold a Sony Move controller. However, only one of the controllers illuminate all of the controller lights when moved. So in this case, if only the player on the left moves, nothing happens. If the player in the middle moves, again, nothing happens. But if the person on the far right moves, as you can see, it causes all of the lights to turn on. It's up to me as the interrogator to try and figure out who the leader is by getting the group to perform movements. For instance, raise your arm in the air. Wave left and right. Stop. As you can see, the spies move together at the same time in order to conceal who the identity of the leader is. The only rule is that I have to address the group at once as a whole, so I can't just say, like, only the person in the middle jump. Okay then, let's now start by playing a game of identity together. So, I'm going to say, okay, can you move in front?
Yep.
Sorry.
Where do I go?
Yep.
Yep.
So use conceal for me first.
Thanks.
So at this stage, they figure out who it is. Okay, you ready to begin?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to give them a couple of commands first. So, okay, raise your left leg up in the air. Hop around in a circle.
Oh man.
Okay, stop. Oh, I'm not sure. Okay, can I get someone from the audience? Do they have any ideas for something to ask?
Do like this. That doesn't work.
Okay. So, who thinks it's this person? Shout if you think it's this person. What about this person?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this person on the end? Okay. I guess it has to be this person. I think it's this person.
No.
Not me? Okay.
Who is it?
Fooled you.
There it is.
Same guy.
With identity, we present a novel interaction technique for designing games called innominate movement representation. We define innominate movement representation as an approach to designing games where it is deliberately made unclear whose movement representation belongs to which player. Typically in games, it is clear and obvious whose representation belongs to which player. For instance, in the above example, everyone knows that the player's movements are mapped to that of the goalie on the left, and the right player, the striker. However, we are inspired by a body of existing research on using ambiguity for the purposes of design. For instance, Gaber and colleagues' work on ambiguity suggests that facilitating uncertainty from the withholding of information can be a valuable resource for designers who aim to engage people with interactive and playful experiences. An example of using inanimate movement representation is with Fish and Steps, a game that monitors and represents each player's step count data in the form of fish avatars that grow larger when fed by physical activity. Players do not know the size of each fish. The resulting ambiguity from these inanimate movement representations facilitates social interactions as the design encourages speculation to occur between co-located players and the display. Spy Party is another example of using inanimate representations. In this case, two players role-play either a spy or a sniper. Only one of those avatars is controlled by the spy, while all the others are controlled by the game itself. The spy tries to control their avatar in such a way that they remain inconspicuous from the other avatars so as to not get caught out by the sniper while completing objectives. These related works, as well as identity, show the potential of using inanimate representations to facilitate new types of play experiences. With regards to inanimate gameplay, this inspires questions that challenge existing conventions of movement representation in games, such as, what happens if technology represented some players' movements but not others? If a player could take control of another player's representation, or whether the representation could challenge the players to perform their movements together at the same time? What if the challenge in the game centred around a lack of clear relationship between movement and representation? Ultimately, the goal with identity is to contribute new design knowledge on how designers can use inanimate movement representation in order to extend the range of digital games and play experiences. We designed identity at last year's Game Jam workshop at CHI, where over 20 people took part. Here is us during the design process at the Game Jam. Each iteration was followed up by playtests with the other participants to get feedback on the current stage of the design. To evaluate the design of identity, we conducted a study with 25 participants across 4 play sessions. Participants played 6 to 8 games per session, followed by post-game semi-structured interviews. The data gathering and analysis process was done through recording video and audio footage of both playtests and interviews, with the findings having emerged then being grouped into a set of common themes. We now present a set of design considerations and corresponding strategies that were revealed through this evaluation of identity for how designers can use inanimate movement representation to facilitate engaging play experiences. The first consideration concerns the extent to which inanimate movement representations are concealed and revealed to the players. In non-digital games, the range to which information is concealed and revealed is often binary. For instance, in poker, the cards are either completely concealed or revealed to players. However, interactive technologies offer opportunities to facilitate shifting levels of ambiguity that move accordingly with the player's ability to perform movement collectively. In identity, we found players really engaged with the ambiguity that resulted from how the associations between movement and representation gradually revealed over time. This facilitated a journey of progression, anticipation, and excitement as the experience reached its climax, followed by post-game laughter and thoughtful reflection of memorable moments that had led up to the final reveal. We therefore recommend for designers to facilitate these shifting levels of ambiguity when representing bodily actions. The second strategy considers the location of representation in relation to the body. Most Wii, Connect and Move games direct the player's focus on the individual performance in relation to a screen away from bodies, as opposed to with the body movements themselves. We too made an initial version of identity that did not use the controllers as output, but rather the graphically represented movement on a screen positioned away from the movement itself. The interrogator would look up at the spies, then glance back down at the laptop. However, players didn't like the physical disparity this caused between input and output, as they would look up from the screen only to find out that the movements of the players had changed from what had been shown moments earlier. We'd tackle this design's challenge by removing the screen and having the movement be represented with the controllers themselves. Having outputs spread across all of the controllers emphasised the group's collective performance as opposed to just the performance of the individual. The shared representation across multiple devices supported the sense of social connection towards one another's performance. When designing games that use inanimate movement representation, we therefore recommend for designers to position representation with bodily actions in order to facilitate this engagement with physical performances. The third strategy firstly considers the extent to which people are able to access the representation. Spectators were able to gather around the play space in a circle to engage with the game, due to the 360-degree access to the lights, to create a spectacle drawing people closer towards these physical performances. From experiencing this initial engagement, spectators would often then become actively involved in influencing the game's outcome. By collaborating with the interrogator would often ask these spectators to perform different tasks or offer suggestions. The second part of this strategy considers the ways in which people use what we call innominate tactics. Innominate tactics are the player's tactical use of social and spatial attributes of play as means of concealing information and deceiving others. We found players particularly enjoyed using concealed verbal discussion from other players. For instance, at the start of the game, the spies would turn around and gather in a circle in order to physically block their interaction with the controller from the interrogator and spectators. The interrogator and some of the spectators would often gather towards the climax of the game to discuss their thoughts while ensuring not to be overheard. Another concealing tactic used by the interrogator was to position the spies in such a way that it made it more difficult for them to see one another, such as getting them to lie down on the floor or close their eyes. Spies used the start of the game as an opportune time to consider the use of body language for deceiving other players. For instance, here the group decides to get the person on the right to pretend to act as the leader. The other two then pretended the person on the right was their leader, when in actual fact he wasn't. However, these mind games sometimes worked against the spies, as others found it easier to trigger accidental movements, such as giggles or laughter. These accidental movements would then give the group away due to the controller's high level of sensitivity to movement. Taking these considerations into account, we therefore recommend for designers to use representations that are accessible to others in order to facilitate involvement with inanimate tactics. The take-home message from this talk today is that using inanimate representations of movement can enable the creation of novel and engaging play experiences. Do try out the game for yourself at Interactivity if you get the chance. You can contact me via the above email. My name is Jayden Garner, and thank you very much for listening.
Somebody with a question there?
So you've got time for a couple minutes of questions.
Hi. Perttu Hamalainen from RMIT University, Finland. Thanks for the very interesting talk. I was just wondering, do dominant strategies emerge when the same group of people play again and again? So what's the replay value? Did you observe any kind of dominant strategies, or do the spies learn to adapt to different instructions?
Well, it's interesting because we played 6 to 8 games at each play session. So we found over time that people would learn how other people were responding. So then they would try and adapt, like you were saying. But then at the same time, we had this dynamic that they realised that and then they would try to adapt back again. So it's this whole psychology of like, these are different reactions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Got time for another question if anyone has one. Great. So actually I have a question. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about when some of the strategies might break down, so when you might choose not to use them or times when you'd have to modify them.
Okay, yeah. So like, for instance, for the second strategy where you're positioning the representations like with the body itself, sometimes you might want to actually have a little bit of that physical disparity to add additional challenge to the experience. We're not saying like it's all the time has to be with the body, but it's just something that we found through our playtesting experience that players, because of the challenge with the Innominate representation, they did not like the additional challenge of having to try to look down and then back up at the display. So that's an instance of a strategy that could be played around with. That's very adaptable, but yeah, would need further playtesting. Yeah.
Great, let's thank Jayden.